We start our show tonight with a very important interview, an interview with India's first Chief of Defence Staff, CDS, General Bipin Rawat, the man who is steering India's effort to create an integrated approach to defence strategy. I spoke to him about the many facets of modern warfare and if India is utilising all of them to its advantage. We also discussed the disengagement process with China in Ladakh, the status of ceasefire along the border with Pakistan, and most importantly, we asked him which neighbour poses a bigger threat to India, Pakistan or China. Here are some excerpts from our interview with General Bipin Rawat. General Rawat, welcome to WION, sir.
Thank you. It's been wonderful being here with you today.
Sir, different countries define the role of the Chief of Defence Staff differently. In the United States, for instance, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff outranks all commissioned officers. In the United Kingdom, the CDS is responsible for how operations are carried out. You're India's first CDS. How do you describe your role and how do you view your progress more than 1 year into the job?
You have very rightly addressed the issue of how higher defence organisations in different countries should take shape. In our country too, the Chief of the Defence Staff has been created considering our own strategic perspectives. Now you are aware that the tasks that have been entrusted to Chief of Defence Staff are threefold. Firstly is to bring about jointness. Second is integration amongst the services. And third, of course, is transformation. Therefore, what is clearly laid out for the Chief of Defence Staff is to become the principal military advisor towards our Defence Minister or our Raksha Mantri and provide impartial advice to the political leadership.
In the month of February, India and China agreed to a partial troop pullout. Since then, what progress have we made in the disengagement process?
Well, we've had some very good progress made in the area of Pangong Tso, where the north and south banks have now been vacated. In the other areas, it is happening in a transitory manner. There are always suspicions on both sides. When you have adversaries and you had these kind of engagements in the past, there are always suspicions that if you withdraw prematurely, will the other side come up and occupy the same features? Therefore, because of these kind of suspicions that we have, we are trying to resolve this at the diplomatic level, at the political level, and at the military level. I think we are making good headway. And while we should not expect very quick progress, because I mentioned there will be suspicions, at the same time, we have to ensure and not allow our guard to be lowered. We cannot take things for granted. Therefore, we have to move in a very cautious manner, yet we do not want to continue to operate in this manner because this creates tension. And whenever you have troops which are in close proximity, there are always chances of the situation escalating. So this is what our commanders want, that we must de-escalate at the earliest, and I think gradually we will succeed in achieving what we wish to achieve. It's a slow process, but it will happen in times to come.
Recently, there were also reports, sir, that the Chinese military has conducted exercises near eastern Ladakh. What's your assessment of the situation on the border right now? And are we aiming to achieve status quo ante, or is it too much to ask for right now?
Well, all armies during peacetime carry out their training activities, and conduct of exercises is one such event which ensures that you maintain your operational preparedness. Because everybody carries out turnover of troops. We have also carried out some turnover of troops. We are also getting a report of Chinese carrying out their turnover of troops in their areas. So whenever you have new troops coming to the area, you normally familiarize them with their operational tasks. And the best way to familiarize them with these tasks is to carry out and conduct exercises. So this is what the Chinese are doing, and this is exactly what we have been doing. In our case, what happens is we frequent our borders more often, whereas on the Chinese side, they have a large number of conscript army. So it takes time for them to get used to, get acclimatized, get familiar with the terrain, get familiar with the kind of operations that they are expected to carry out in such high mountain areas. So they need to practice and train. We keep a close watch on them, and we are monitoring the situation very carefully. But exercise is a very regular feature, and I think it should not be a cause for concern. But at the same time, we should not lower our guard, and we have to continuously monitoring the activities of Chinese and make sure that they do not come to the areas which have been vacated earlier.
The question of status quo ante, is that what we are aiming for in Ladakh?
Yes, we wish to achieve status quo ante, and our bottom line is that we want to revert to April 2020 situation. And this is what has been communicated to the Chinese. So the ultimate aim is to ensure that we revert to status quo ante. Because if we revert to status quo ante, then there will be, some kind of belief in each other, some kind of satisfaction that it is not likely to lead to further escalation. So the attempt is to ensure that we reach status quo ante. As I said, it will be a gradual process, but I'm quite sure both sides are looking at returning to status quo ante, and let's hope for the best, because effort is being made at all levels, as I said, be it political, diplomatic, or at the military front. Our lower commanders are constantly in contact with each other to make sure that the situation does not turn ugly.
So modern warfare has many facets. It's not just the border and the battlefield anymore. There can be economic and diplomatic pushback. There can be strategic alliances. Do you think India is effectively mounting what is called a 360-degree challenge to China's expansionism?
That is exactly, I think, what we need to be looking at. We have to prepare for future kinds of warfare. As you have rightly identified, we cannot fight the next war like we fought the last war. The wars will be fought by the militaries on the borders, but I think there is now greater relevance being given to non-contact warfare. And when we look at non-contact warfare has two facets, one in the military field and the other in the non-military field. In the military field, non-contact warfare can be cyber warfare, it can be warfare which is psychological, which is other issues where there is no physical contact between the troops, yet you are at war. But the other side of warfare is economic warfare. It could be biological form of warfare. So anything else, I think, and I think we have to be prepared for it. And I think our nation, India as a whole, is looking at the international community to work together and make sure that this kind of warfare does not go unaddressed, and that the Committee of Nations unite together to ensure that any one nation which carries out this kind of warfare in isolation is dealt with in a firm manner through a grouping of nations, through a collective effort, so that individual nations, we are capable of taking care of our situation, but there are other nations which are weak who do not suffer. So I think the weak, the strong, everybody has to get together to make sure that any one particular nation does not roughshod the other. So these are issues which we have to deal with, and I think we see the proactive effort by the Ministry of External Affairs, and all the other ministries, the way they are moving forward, whether it is the economic situation, whether it is the diplomacy or anything else that we are trying to look at. We are making sure that we are able to manage our situation without getting embroiled in direct contact with the adversary, but at the same time address the issues of non-contact warfare, both from the military and the civilian perspective.
Another kind of non-contact warfare is a constant propaganda war, some would say, a narrative war. And these have become integral to how countries deal, not just with adversaries, but also how they keep their allies in check. How do you think India is faring in the face of, say, Western control of the narrative?
No, we are, I think, ensuring that we maintain our strategic autonomy. We are a nation, we are not a nation that can be pushed over. We understand our strength, we understand our challenges, and therefore, we carry out a proper appreciation of where lie our strength and where lie our challenges. And I think we need to cash on our strength, and wherever we have challenges, and in these challenges, if we find some weaknesses, we need to address those weaknesses. But if we have to take some support from other nations in overcoming the challenges that we have, I think we should not hesitate. And I think that is the way forward, and that is what is happening today. And I think because of the COVID and the kind of support that we gave initially to the international community, the kind of support that the nations are now giving to us in return at this juncture is helping us not in overcoming the pandemic and the COVID-19 situation, but I think the international community is moving forward to ensure that India does not remain isolated and gets support no matter in whatever field, whether it is economic support, diplomatic support, or any other kind of support that India may need. So I think to that extent, the whole of the government approach, we've been able to accomplish the desired mission.
Right. And there's also the element of politics. Until recently, the army's position and role was more or less sacrosanct. But in the recent past, and also when you were army chief, we saw that there was more and more politics over the military, the demand for proof of actions. Does all of this bother you? And how do you draw the line between the demand for accountability and the politics over security forces?
I don't think in the military we get too concerned about this. Because when we execute an action, we know what we have achieved. And the adversaries also understand what kind of damage they have suffered. So we don't have to get concerned about what people say. We have to believe in ourselves. And so long as we believe in ourselves we understand that our military is capable of delivering results when the time comes, no matter how difficult the task is, I think it gives us satisfaction. And it is for us to look inwards and see, are we satisfied with what we achieved, and not bother about what the others say or feel.
Of course. In the month of February, India and Pakistan made an unexpected joint ceasefire announcement. Then in the month of March, Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa also said that it's time to bury the past and move forward. Has the situation really improved on the border with Pakistan?
We've had these ceasefires in the past. The first one we saw was in 2003. How long did it last, we all know. This time we are going for yet another phase of the ceasefire, but this time the ceasefire was, I think, more on humanitarian grounds, because both sides, the civilians were suffering casualties, because invariably we found that whenever there was a ceasefire violation and there was pressure on Pakistan, they would start targeting our civilian population. So we were concerned about the casualties that our civilians were suffering, the damage to their property, the damage to their cattle and their crops. So we were also concerned about the ceasefire, and so ceasefire has happened. Well, I have been watching the Chief of the Army Staff visiting forward areas, his commanders visiting forward areas. There is constant communication taking place between the lower commanders, between the Pakistan and the Army commanders and the Indian Army commanders. So I think as of now the ceasefire is holding, except for one small minor incident that happened in Samba between the Rangers and the BSF. But I think we cannot lower our guard. So all that I would like to say is Pakistan must understand, if they want a genuine ceasefire, they must ceasefire on all fronts. Ceasefire on the borders, ensure no support to terrorism in the hinterland, make sure that these warlike stores are not delivered. And if this continues, only then we should accept the kind of ceasefire and have faith in the ceasefire. Otherwise, our armed forces are always ready to retaliate in a befitting manner, because any incident of violation of the ceasefire or any attempt at infiltration along the line of control, and I think they will get a befitting reply from our troops deployed on the borders. We are not lowering our guard while we are exercising utmost caution, but in no way will we allow Pakistan to take advantage of this ceasefire by allowing this kind of a thing to happen.
Why do you think they're making these peace offers now? And earlier there used to be almost daily reports of actions along the border. With your experience of having dealt with how the Pakistani side behaves, do you think things are actually on the mend, or is this the lull before the storm?
Well, the kind of escalation that had happened over the past few years, especially after the Burhan Wani incident, we found that the situation in the hinterland went awry, and then we were able to bring the situation under control. I think then there were attempts at infiltrating terrorists back into our country, because they wanted situation to again escalate in the hinterland, I think. And then they realized that with the ceasefire violation happening, their military was suffering, because they suffered heavy losses in as far as defense works were concerned, especially the forward defenses. The troops were not able to send supplies to their forward deployed troops. Casualties were being suffered on both sides as far as civilian casualties are concerned. On the Pakistan side, the Pakistan army and the civil population is living within close proximity of each other. So whenever a ceasefire violation takes place, maybe at times they suffer collateral damage. That is because Pakistan has been using civilian villages to deploy their weapon systems, especially when we find mortars and artillery weapons being used. So sometimes maybe because of collateral damage they've suffered some losses. And maybe the pressure has come from the civilians on the Pakistan side that they must go in for the ceasefire. At the same time, I think the kind of damages their defenses have suffered and the casualties they have suffered along the line of control also compelled them to go in for a ceasefire. At the same time, I would also like to add that the western borders had become very active. And so they were actually facing a two-front situation. And therefore, realizing that the western border is becoming very active, they possibly have given this call for a ceasefire on the eastern front. So we have to wait and watch as to how the Afghanistan situation evolves, and finally how long will this ceasefire last. We are quite confident that if they respect the ceasefire, we will respect the ceasefire. But if they vitiate the situation, and I said, even sending these warlike stores across the border is vitiating the situation and does not augment well for continuation of the ceasefire. And but the final call will be taken in case we find that it is getting out of hand and beyond control. And repeatedly, if these acts keep happening and we keep getting reports or recovering these weapons that are being sent from across, then there may be a change in strategy on our side as well.
For more than 7 decades, India has lived with a persistent security challenge from Pakistan. In the case of China, there have been crests and troughs. As of today, General Rawat, which neighbor, according to you, poses a bigger security threat to India, Pakistan or China?
I think we are very clear as to where our security challenges rise, and very many years ago, our defense ministers have spelled this out for us. And so I think this need not be spelled out in clear terms. We know that we have challenges on both sides, but we have to obviously address a larger neighbor with some degree of concern. So we understand where the challenges lie.
Does that mean China?
Yeah, obviously, as I said, when you have a larger neighbor which has got a better force, better technology, so you obviously prepare for a larger neighbor. At the same time, you have both the neighbors, but you have a neighbor on the other side which is rogue. So while the other neighbor may be still more pragmatic in decision making, this side there are actually terrorists who are operating alongside them. Now terrorists somehow at times go out of control of the establishment on that side, and they could actually escalate the situation. And like we had the situation in Kargil, if that kind of situation happens again, then even the western neighbor could become a challenge.
Right. You mentioned Afghanistan, and that's another developing story in India's neighborhood. American troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. How do you assess it in terms of security implications for the region?
I think the entire international community is looking at Afghanistan very closely, and so are we. So how the situation will evolve, we'll have to wait and watch what kind of government comes in. The people of Afghanistan themselves, what do they want? And finally, whichever government comes to power, is it looking at the development of Afghanistan, because the people have seen semblance of peace over the past few years, and I'm sure that people want to continue with this kind of a situation. So whatever government comes to power, are they going to allow this kind of developmental activity which has happened, the kind of role that the women in the country have started playing, the kind of freedom that is there for the people, the schools have started opening up, and a lot of activity, developmental activity has happened. So I think the people themselves will take a call as to what they need to do. And for us, I think we have to keep a close watch on Afghanistan, which I'm quite sure that the people who are responsible for this are taking note of these issues.
Back in 2019, as India's army chief, you'd said that India should engage with the Taliban. Do you still believe that India should talk to the Taliban?
As I said, the people who are responsible for dealing with the situation in Afghanistan are dealing with it, and I'm quite sure what is best for India, they would be looking at all the issues. And if that is the best, I'm sure they will address the issue in a very positive manner.
You're at the helm of affairs at a very interesting time, sir. India is making bold moves to build strategic alliances like the Quad. What are your expectations from the Quad, and is it fair to call it the Asian NATO?
Well, as we have said, Quad is something which is more of an alliance for ensuring, the freedom of navigation on the Indo-Pacific region, on the high seas, because everybody talks of, the kind of trade, the kind of merchant ships that move in this area. So everybody wants that there should be free movement. So as of now, I think it is a group of 4 nations which are ensuring peace in this region. I think as of now, it is something which we want to ensure that there is freedom of navigation. There is, the passage of ships that happen in this area are not affected by any kind of warlike situation. That is the concern as far as we are concerned. But I don't think beyond that we should look at it as of now. In the future, it is very difficult to predict what form the Quad will take.
I'm sure India is in good hands when it comes to the integration of the forces for the jointness that you have been telling us about. Thank you very much, General Rawat, for your time and for taking all our questions.
Thank you indeed, and it's been wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you, sir. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.